Hola.
¿Cómo estás?
Bien. You must be Paul's brother from Costa Rica.
Yeah, something's different.
Something. So, yes, Paul is freshly back from Costa Rica after your retreat.
It went very well. It was very dharmic.
Dharma, yes. Fulfilling our mission.
Yes.
That's what life is about. Let's fulfill our mission today and teach a little bit of what we've learned. Last session was 85, and we read a couple of letters from KH to Mr. Leadbeater and found out that he decided to give up his position as a priest in the Anglican Church and to devote his life to theosophy by moving to India. He was all in. So he got 2 letters. We read both of them. And he sped across the continent and met up with HPB in Port Said near the opening of the Suez Canal, where they transferred ships. She had been in a different ship, the Clan Drummond, and then they took a different ship from there on to India. And in the last letter also, we read a letter from HPB to Sinnett that she wrote during that first part of the trip in the Clan Drummond, which she called a rolling washtub.
Now, when you say Leadbeater went across the country to meet HPB, which country?
He went across to France and took the train down to Marseille. And from there, he was able to catch another boat to meet up with her. They did meet up and made the rest of the journey together. So we have Leadbeater on his way to India, and we have HPB on her way to India. But before that, she wrote a letter to Sinnett and described the events in it, where she received it in an unusual fashion. Go back and watch 85 if you haven't done that, because it's very interesting. We also caught up with W.Q. Judge, who had gone previously to India, but who, because he was intimidated by Franz Hartmann, left and went back to London before the founders ever arrived. Let's go ahead and see what happened when she arrived in India. This again comes from this book by Sylvia Cranston, the very best book about HPB that you can find.
The welcome received when the boat arrived in India was quite a contrast, she continues.
Now, remember that all of this Coulombs folderol had been going on for several months while HPB was in Europe. And she was beginning to be criticized by everyone in Europe and the English in India. They were all losing faith in her. And she was very demoralized, at a low ebb. We'll see what happened when she arrived.
The welcome received when the boat arrived was quite a contrast. She continues, a deputation accompanied by a brass band came off in boats to meet us.
How about that?
On landing at the pier head, there were hundreds to meet HPB, and we were literally towed by enthusiastic members down the pier in a truck.
Now, this wasn't a motor truck. This was a truck that was meant to be pulled by horses, but let's see what happened.
Wildly decorated with paper, roses, etc., and then surrounded by masses of smiling dark faces.
They insisted on pulling it themselves. They said, we don't need no horses. Take your horses. So the students at the college pulled it themselves.
Jeez. They were then driven off to Pachayappa's hall, where an address was delivered to HPB, signed by 300 students of Madras College, including the Christian college that had published the Coulombs charges. The statement read in part, you have dedicated your life to the disinterested services of disseminating the truths of occult philosophy. Upon the sacred mysteries of our hoary religion and philosophies, You have thrown a flood of light by sending into the world that marvelous production of yours, the Isis Unveiled. By your exposition, has our beloved Colonel been induced to undertake the gigantic labor of love, the vivifying on the altars of Aryavarta, the dying flames of religion and spirituality.
So this was the reception by the native people. Very, very different. By this time, they knew what Theosophy and HPB and Alcott were all about. And it was uplifting their own religious philosophy instead of putting them down, as had been happening for several centuries. So she was a hero in India among the native people. And this was the way they greeted her and thought of her. The English, very different. Now, this is the letter that K.H. wrote to Sinnett. It was received at London, November 8th, 1884. So this was just a few days after HPB had left.
Letter number 134. Yeah. Entirely private except for Mohini and Francesca Arundel.
Mohini was still there. Remember, he was only supposed to be in London for a few months. He decided to stay there a little bit longer, and he was staying with Francesca Arundel.
Good friend, this is not an answer to your last. The letter to my address sent by you through Mohini was never written by yourself. In fact, it was penned by one at the time entirely under the influence of a creature of Atavata.
Atavata is a term that means intense self-centeredness. A situation with most people where they live in their own universe, and the center of the universe is that person's self.
Quote, the sin of self, who in the universe, as in a mirror, sees her fond face shone, end quote.
This is a quote from Light of Asia by Sir Edwin Arnold. This is a book that I'm quite certain was inspired. It's a poetic version of the life of Buddha, and it's an amazing book. The masters held it in high esteem, and so did Alcott and HPB, so they quite often quote from it. But this sounds like someone who is enamored with their own reflection. And who's he talking about? He's talking about Laura Holloway. So let's see what he has to say about her.
And only hers.
And only hers. That's the only face she sees reflected in the mirror.
The sin of self, who in the universe, as in a mirror, sees her fond face shone, and only hers, whose every word he then implicitly trusted, perhaps because there came no half-expected interference, no word of warning from our quarters. Thus, there is no response to it, for we would rather turn a new page.
And then, based on what he says, it sounds like Sinnett wrote it, but that he was repeating her impressions or opinions, not his own. So take that however you want.
Ah, how long shall the mysteries of chelasship overpower and lead away from the path of truth the wise and perspicacious, just as much as the foolish and the credulous? How few of the many pilgrims who have to start without navigation chart or compass on that shoreless ocean of occultism reach the wished-for land.
Yeah, this is very poetic. Starting out on a voyage where you don't have any maps, no navigation maps. You know the general direction, but you don't know where you're going. And this is the case for every single chela who is just starting this voyage. They don't know where they're headed. They don't know exactly what direction to go, except in general. So this is very accurate.
Believe me, faithful friend, that nothing short of full confidence in us, in our good motives, if not in our wisdom and our foresight, if not omniscience, which is not to be found on this earth, can help one to cross over from one's land of dream and fiction to our truth land, the region of stern reality and fact.
Yeah, this is the problem. Most chelas have a fantasy version of where it is that they're headed and what they can expect. But that isn't how the masters operate. What they deal with is reality, how things actually are. And a lot of the psychics and clairvoyants and mediums have this kind of fantasy world that they live in. That doesn't work for chelaszship and for occultism. This is hard science. It's just not physical science, it's superphysical science.
Why does he say, if not omniscience? Is he implying that they kind of have omniscience?
He's saying that sometimes the chelas believe they are all-knowing, omniscient, but he said that doesn't exist on this earth, meaning that there are beings who are omniscient, but they aren't in physical form.
Okay. Which is not to be found on this earth. Okay, it makes sense. Thank you. Otherwise, the ocean will prove shoreless indeed. Its waves will carry one no longer on waters of hope, but will turn every ripple into doubt and suspicion. And they shall prove bitter to him who starts on that dismal, tossing sea of the unknown with a prejudiced mind. This doesn't sound like K.H. really talking here.
Oh yeah, it does, absolutely. But he's getting very disenchanted with Sinnett. Remember, several letters back, he gave him a last chance.
Yeah.
And he's giving him that chance right now. He's giving him plenty of time to change his way of looking at things. But what he's saying is that if you start on this voyage with preconceived ideas and aren't willing to change those pretty quickly when you encounter facts that are different from that, you're going to dash yourself against the rocks. And this is disconcerting when you start out on something like that. The first voyage of Christopher Columbus, they had no idea how far it might be before they would encounter Asia. Yeah. They sailed west to go to Asia without any idea of how far that might be. And after a few weeks, the sailors were getting very upset, and they were afraid that they were not ever going to find land.
They might fall off the edge or something.
But it took 33 days before they finally landed. Today, that voyage would take a week at most. And even in 1880, it took 1 week to cross from North America to England.
Nevertheless, don't feel too perplexed. The hour of trial is half over. Try to understand, instead, the whys and wherefores of the situation, to study more seriously the laws that govern our occult world. I grant you that those laws very often seem unjust, and at times even cruel. But this is because they were never meant for the immediate correction of wrongs or the direct help of those who offer, at random, their allegiance to the legislators. Still, the seemingly real, the evanescent and temporary evils they bring about are as necessary to the growth, progress, and final establishment of your small Theosophical Society as certain cataclysms in nature, which often decimate whole populations, are necessary to mankind. An earthquake may, for all the world knows, be a blessing, and a tidal wave may prove salvation to the many at the expense of the few.
And they've mentioned that before, that Shiva has to do his work. Yes, he is the builder, but before you can build something, you have to destroy whatever it is replacing. That's exactly what happens. It doesn't matter whether it's a physical building or whether it's a group of people who have served their purpose, and now it's time for a new group to take over. They sometimes have to be reduced in numbers, and that's what happens at the end of every root race.
The fittest were seen to survive in the destruction of every old race and made to merge into and assimilate with the new, for nature is older than Darwin. Instead, tell yourself, whatever happened, there's no cause for regret.
Yeah, we should look at things that way always. It happened, let's move on.
Mm-hmm. There's no cause for regret, for it is not so much that new facts should be revealed to the inner group, as that old puzzles and mysteries should have been explained and made clear to its few entirely staunch members.
He's still advocating for more information. And Cage was saying, you don't need more information. You need to understand what you've already got.
Even an innocent quotation mark, fallen from under my pencil and objected to by you, would have had a world of meaning for one less beclouded than you were in writing your last letter. Okay, so it is him. It is Sinnett who wrote. Okay.
Yeah.
Your last letter, based entirely on the crafty insinuations of your would-be Sibyl.
Yeah, Sybil is a prophetess.
Oh, wow. It was absolutely necessary that, within the personal experience of those few staunch members, yourself included, the secret working of karma should take place. That its deeper meaning should be practically illustrated, as well as its effects, on those self-opinionated volunteers and candidates for chelaship who will rush under the dark shadow of her wheels.
And those wheels are karma. Mm-hmm. What he's saying relates to what we've said in the past. The wheels of the gods grind slowly, but they grind ever so fine. And some people rush out to become one of these chelas, saying, I want to be one, I want to be one. And they throw themselves under these wheels of karma that then start doing their work, and they get ground down by it.
Against the above, some will say, but what about her great clairvoyance, her chelaship, her selection among the many by the masters? Her clairvoyance is a fact, her selection and chelaship another. However well fitted psychically and physiologically to answer such a selection, unless possessed of spiritual as well as physical unselfishness, a chela, whether selected or not, must perish as a chela in the long run. Self-personality, vanity, and conceit, harbored in the higher principles, are enormously more dangerous than the same defects inherent only in the lower physical nature of man.
This is really interesting and important to keep in mind. Too many chelas, or wannabe chelas, have the idea that I'm very devout, I'm very pure, I'm completely ready. And yet, there is a spiritual ego, he's saying, as well as an ego in the outer world. And I don't think many spiritual people recognize that. And this is probably the greatest impediment to chelaship, this spiritual ego that people still retain and think that that one is okay.
They are the breakers against which the cause of chelaship, in its probationary stage, is sure to be dashed to pieces. Unless the would-be disciple carries with him the white shield of perfect confidence and trust in those he would seek, through mount and vale to guide him safely toward the light of knowledge. The world moves and lives under the shadow of the deadly upas tree of evil. Yet its dripping sap is dangerous to those whose higher and middle natures are as susceptible of infection as their lower one. Its venomous seed can germinate only in a willing, well-prepared soil.
Yes, what is this upas tree? It's a Southeast Asian tree whose sap is used for making poison arrows.
Whoa!
Yeah, and in fact, if it drips on you, if it even gets on your skin, I don't know if it would kill you, but it would certainly not be a pleasant sensation.
Wow.
So he's comparing that to the dangers of presenting yourself as a chela. I hope we've made it clear. It's extremely dangerous. Don't kid yourself.
Remember the cases of Fern, Murad Ali Beg, and Bishan Lal, good friend, and remember what you have learnt. The mass of human sin and frailty is distributed throughout the life of man who is content to remain an average mortal. It is gathered in and centered, so to say, within one period of the life of a chela, the period of probation.
And we've said this numerous times. As soon as you apply to become a chela, your karma is going to speed up. That means more suffering. That means more obstacles. That means more stress. No way around it. So be prepared.
That which is generally accumulating to find its legitimate exit only in the next rebirth of an ordinary man is quickened and fanned into existence in the chela, especially in the presumptuous and selfish candidate who rushes in without having calculated his forces.
Yeah, so that's what he's saying. When you throw yourself under the wheels of karma, just remember you asked for it.
Quote, one who dug so many deep pitfalls for her friends and brothers fell into them herself, said Moria to HPB on the night of the mutual revelations.
I wonder who he's talking about. Let's go ahead and continue.
I tried to, but could not save her. She had entered, or rather, I should say, forced herself into the dangerous path, with a double purpose in view. 1, to upset the whole structure in which she had no part, and thus obstruct the path to all others, if she did not find the system and the society at the level of her expectations. And 2, to remain true and work out her chelaship and natural gifts that are considerable indeed, but only if those expectations were all met. It is the intensity of that resolution that first attracted my attention. Led on gradually and gently in the right direction, the acquisition of such an individuality would have been invaluable. But there are persons who, without ever showing any external sign of selfishness, are intensely selfish in their inner spiritual aspirations. These will follow the path once chosen by them, with their eyes closed to the interests of all but themselves, and see nothing outside the narrow pathway filled with their own personality. Wow.
All right, so this Laura Holloway had tremendous potential. She spent 5 months in London under the direct supervision of HPB and the indirect supervision of the Mahatmas, with every possible opportunity for advancement, given the assignment, along with Mohini, to write a book that would teach everything that the Mahatmas had been teaching to Sinnett, and yet her ego ruined everything. She had in mind that if this was a fraud, she was going to reveal that and notify the entire world. And they would acclaim her one of the greatest persons for having revealed that this was fraudulent. And if it wasn't, let's see what else she had in mind.
They are so intensely absorbed in the contemplation of their own supposed righteousness that nothing can ever appear right to them outside the focus of their own vision, distorted by their self-complacent contemplation and their judgment of right and wrong. Alas, such a one is our new mutual friend, Elsie Holloway. Quote, the right in thee is base, the wrong a curse, end quote, was said by our Lord Buddha, for such is she for right and wrong. Quote, cheat such as love themselves, end quote, and the others only in proportion to the benefits derived, though these benefits be purely spiritual.
Now, these two quotes are again from The Light of Asia. And when he says, he's putting words in the mouth of the Buddha, the right in thee is base, the wrong a curse. So she has her ideas of what is right and what is wrong. But her right, what she thinks is right, is not correct.
Yeah.
And everything then is wrong in her. So the right is base, it's self-absorption, it's all about me, and the wrong is going to be a curse because you're going to end up with the karma that comes with it.
Aroused some 18 months ago to spasmodic hysterical curiosity by the perusal of your occult world, and later on by that of esoteric Buddhism, to enthusiastic envy, she was determined to find out the truth. As she expressed it, she would either become a chela herself, first and foremost, to write books, thus eclipsing her lay rival. Who's the rival? Sinnett? Oh, gosh. Or upset the whole imposture in which she had no involvement. She decided to go to Europe and find you. Her overexcited imagination, putting a mask on every stray spook, created the student and made him serve her purpose and desire.
Okay, so she's quite full of herself. She thinks she's the be-all and end-all in the occult world. She was an author, and she was a well-known author in America. So she said this A.P. Sinnett, whoever he is, might think he knows something, but I can outdo him. She said, as we saw, if it's fake, I will reveal that. But if it's real, I'm going to write books that will eclipse his. I can write way better than he can. And I'll get him out of the way, and I'll become the number one pupil of these masters. So let's see whether or not that worked out.
She believed in it sincerely. At this point, foreseeing the new danger, I interfered. Darbagiri Nath was dispatched and made to impress her thrice in my name.
Darbagiri Nath, remember, was a chela. And remember, that was Babaji, whose body Darbagiri Nath used one time to appear and converse with Sinnett. Babaji continued to use that name, Darbagiri Nath.
Right.
But the real Darbagiri Nath, as far as we know, never left Tibet. He had lived with KH for more than 13 years, and this was 2 years ago. So now it's more than 15 years that he has lived with KH, a very advanced chela. He's not going to be out in the outer world. So he sent him to influence her psychically. Let's continue.
Her thoughts were guided for a certain period. Her clairvoyance made to serve a purpose. If her sincere aspirations had conquered the intense personality of her lower self, I would have given the TS an excellent helper and worker. The poor woman is naturally good and moral, but that very purity is of so narrow a kind, of so Presbyterian a character, if I may use the word, as to be unable to see itself reflected in any other but her own self.
Presbyterian in this usage means very strict, very narrow.
She alone is good and pure. All others must and shall be suspect.
Yeah, we know a few people like that.
Right. A great boon was offered her, but her wayward spirit would allow her to accept none that was not shaped in accordance with her own model.
There you go.
Wow.
Yeah, inflexibility is anathema to a chela. You are not going to be correct in many things that you are convinced are the case. So if you come with preconceived ideas, be prepared to get those smashed.
And now she will receive a letter from me, which will contain my ultimatum and conditions. Ooh. She will not accept them, but will complain bitterly to several among you, suggesting new hints and instructions against one whom she professed to adore. Him. KH.
Yeah.
Prepare. A plank of salvation is offered to her, but there is very little hope that she will accept it.
Remember, he said exactly the same thing about Sinnett a few letters back. He said, I'm allowed to give you one last chance. And he said, I'm going to tell you things you will not want to hear. And whether or not you accept them, which I doubt very much you will determine whether or not our correspondence continues. So it's exactly the same situation. It's like I'm going to put her on notice and tell her that unless something drastic changes, and I doubt very much that she's going to be willing to give up her ego, then it's at an end here.
However, I will try once more, but I have no right to influence her either way. If you will accept my advice, abstain from any serious correspondence with her until some fresh development. Try to save man by looking it over with Mohini, and by erasing from it the alleged inspirations and dictation by student.
Man was the book they wrote together. It was finished, but hadn't yet been published. And It was man, fragments of a forgotten history. So what he is saying is that she had this teacher that she called student, and that student was supposedly furnishing information to her. Unfortunately, it almost invariably was imaginary. It was from some astral entity that was feeding her information. The Mahatmas and Darbagiri Nath were trying to inspire her, and she, while they were directly trying to inspire her, would actually get the information correctly. But as soon as they removed that, she would bring in other stuff that did not match.
Having had also an object and a purpose in view, I had to leave her under her self-delusion that this new book was written with the view of correcting the mistakes, of esoteric Buddhism, of killing it, was the true thought. And it was only on the eve of her departure that Upasika was ordered to see that Mohini should carefully expunge from it all the objectionable passages.
So he wants this book, the manuscript, to be rewritten because what Mohini wrote was good, but what she wrote was partly good and partly no good. So it needed some serious revisions.
During her stay in England, Mrs. Holloway would never have permitted you to see her book before the final publication. But I would like to save 5 months' labor of Mohini and will not permit it to remain unpublished.
So he wants Sinnett to help Mohini rewrite the portions that Mrs. Holloway wrote. She's not going to like that. As it turned out, he did not do that. Imagine that.
As much as remains unexplained, the little you may have gathered from this letter will serve its purpose. It will start your thoughts in a new direction and will have unveiled another corner in the domain of psychological ISIS.
Psychological ISIS. So, this is interesting. ISIS was simply meant, ISIS Unveiled, was simply meant to intrigue people. And it did. It did its purpose. But very little real information was revealed. Now, based on the reception of that, they're ready to unveil a little bit more. But psychological ISIS, why that? Because if you don't understand the psychology of people, of animals, of plants even, then you don't understand nature. Occultism has everything to do with psychology. So if you're not good at seeing underneath the surface and seeing the whys and the wherefores of things, you're probably not going to make a whole lot of advancement. The Mahatmas can look at any situation and see what's going on behind the scenes, what's going on in the minds of the people or even the animals involved. They can read all of that.
It's true understanding. It's an expansion of consciousness.
Exactly. It's seeing a whole picture instead of a physical aspect of it only. And most people, when they think they can read a person, make numerous mistakes. Unless you've been trained by one of these Mahatmas, you will be making mistakes when you make opinions about people and their motives. They, as we know, can see the truth.
We didn't finish the letter.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay. If you want to acquire occult knowledge, you have to remember, my friend, that such learning opens many an unforeseen channel in the stream of chelaship, to whose current even a lay chela must inevitably yield, or else be stranded upon the shoals, and knowing this, to abstain forevermore from judging based on mere appearance. The ice is broken once more. Profit by it, if you can. K.H.
The ice is broken once more. So it has been a month since he last received any information from K.H. That's why he says, All right. I'm willing to work with you again. Let's see what happens. Now, a couple of things I wanted to point out. Remember, we talked last time about Judge when he went to India and the reception he received there from Franz Hartmann. But there's also an interesting thing that I came across recently. This is in a book about Catherine Tingley. She was the person who took over Judge's Society. We're going to hear a story in a later session about what happened after HPB died. And one of the things that happened was that W.Q. Judge removed the Theosophical Society in America from the Adyar group. And then after he died, this lady took over, Catherine Tingley. She was a medium and a clairvoyant and a colorful character.
Are you being gentle?
Yes.
I can tell.
Yes. But there's an interesting statement in this book. The compiler of it is obviously very familiar with this whole story. But he said at one point that Laura Holloway, who knew Judge in America and was attracted to Theosophy because of him, had been noticed by Judge for her clairvoyant abilities, and that at one time he had tried hypnotizing her. Now, who else do we know tried hypnotizing Laura Holloway? A.P. Sinnett.
Right.
So both of them were trying to hypnotize her for what? We know in the case of Sinnett that it was to be in touch with the Mahatmas. Maybe that's the same case with Judge, because remember, Judge had not received any letters. He received one little note that said, "Better come, M." 2 words and a signature, "Better come, M." And that was it. So he may have been trying to get in touch with the Mahatmas. I want to read a little bit of a letter that HPB wrote regarding what we're talking about right now. This is from the letters of H.P. Blavatsky to A.P. Sinnett. And if you'll just read from there to the end of the letter.
My master, whose voice I have just heard, orders me to tell you that as Mohini is likely to stop in London till January, you better profit by his presence to complete your literary work that sleeps for want of materials, but ought not. Seriously, you ought to have him as often as you can to explain and teach you upon the subjects touched in your new book, for now master will give him orders to that effect. Hitherto he could not come to you, give or explain the least thing, for reasons your intuition may explain to you. Now he can and will do so. Dispose of me, for you I will consent now even to serve again as a postman. But for you alone, and will beg you to keep me the secret. I will write from either Algiers or Malta and explain. Do answer me. Love to Mrs. Sinnett. Yours truly again, HPB.
So she also was trying to save Sinnett and his connection with the Mahatmas. Take advantage of the fact that Mohini is staying longer than he intended. Make use of that time and start writing again. So she was also trying, and she said, "I will be your postman once again." Remember, she had gotten fed up with him and had said she wasn't going to do it anymore. But she, like the Mahatmas, has nothing but kindness in her, and she really, really pushed herself to help. Now, this next letter is from HPB, and it's a long letter, so we will probably only get through part of it. It was written at Adyar on March 17th. So if you think about it, the last time we heard from her was when she was on her way to India in November. Now it's 4.5 months later. I need to explain something that I found out, and that is that Sinnett had 2 different boxes of letters. In one box, he kept all of the letters from the Mahatmas. In the other box, he kept all of the ones from HPB. But there were a few letters from HPB that were in the other box. And so when the Mahatma letters to A.P. Sinnett was published in 1923, those letters in that box were also included.
Okay.
And then only a few years later was this other book published with the remaining letters from HPB. So that's why we sometimes have some included with the Mahatma letters. The compiler of the Mahatma letters had put the same date, but I don't see any way that Sinnett could have received it the same day because, as we learned previously, Mohini wasn't able to receive letters, and I don't think there was any chela nearby that could have received it. So we are not really sure when it was received. It was written on March 17th. The interesting thing is, guess what? 2 weeks later, HPB is going to leave India forever. This was written about 2 weeks before that.
Letter number 135. My dear Mr. Sinnett, I am very sorry that the Mahatma should have selected me to fight this new battle. But since there must be concealed wisdom even in the act of choosing a half-dead individual who just rises from 8 weeks of sick bed and can hardly gather her scattered ideas to say that which is better left unsaid, I obey. You cannot have forgotten what I told you repeatedly at Shimla, and what the Master K.H. wrote to you himself, namely that the T.S. is, first of all, a universal brotherhood, not a society for phenomena and occultism. Well, they always forget that. They always forget that point, right?
Yes, Sinnett
And human.
Yeah, they will not give up on that idea.
The latter must be held secret, etc. Owing to my great zeal for the cause, and your assurances that the society would never prosper unless the occult element was introduced into it, and the masters proclaimed, I am more guilty than any for having listened to this. Still, all of you now have to suffer the karma. Well, on the evidence of Padres and other enemies, all the phenomena are now found to be fraudulent by Mr. Hodgson, from the brooch phenomenon on down. That was a long time ago, the brooch incident. The masters are dragged before the public, and their names are desecrated by every rascal in Europe.
The Padres, that was the term that the native people in India used for any of the Christian missionaries.
Oh, Padre.
Yeah.
But that's P-A-D-R-E.
We've come across this a long time ago.
Okay, but this is spelled different.
No, that's because it actually comes from Portuguese.
Okay, no, I'm familiar with Padre. Yeah, you call them their fathers. Padres.
Right, but in the local parlance, they got the idea that any of the Christian authorities were padres, as they called it.
Yeah.
So just like the English would misunderstand words that were used by the local people,
Right.
the same vice versa happened. And it didn't mean a priest necessarily, but any Christian missionary.
The Padres have spent thousands for witnesses, including false ones. Really? They're buying witnesses?
Oh, yeah. For one thing, Madame Coulombs, they paid her money to reveal information against HPB.
Wow.
You pay people money and they will say things that are false. It wasn't like they were before a judge.
It's like they're an informant. They're being
Yes,
paid.
exactly. Tell me what you want to hear.
Yeah.
A little more money, please.
Including false ones, and I was not permitted to go to the law, where I could at least have produced my evidence.
This was a really sore point with HPB. She wanted immediately upon arriving in India to go to a judge, an attorney, anyone and file charges against the missionaries and against Madame Coulombs for bearing false witness. And she was dead set on doing that. Alcott said, look, let's wait until we have the whole council here, because it was at the end of the year when they had their annual meeting. He said, let's discuss it. In that council, they decided absolutely not. It was not going to work out. Number one, HPB was a terrible witness. When she got on the witness stand, she was all excited. She didn't stick to her script, and she got easily flustered. So she was not a good witness. And number two, the one thing that they knew the missionaries would insist on was, you produce something that shows these Mahatmas actually exist. Why don't you call one of them as a witness for you? And it was going to be about whether or not the Mahatmas existed rather than anything else. And they're not going to show up in court. So they knew that it was a lost cause. She fretted about that for a long time.
And now Hodgson, who until this day seemed most friendly and came almost daily to visit us, changed positions.
This is another thing. This investigator that the Society for Psychical Research sent out, a recent graduate, had very good intentions at the beginning, apparently. He was very friendly, seemed very well disposed to believing the information that was given to him by the Theosophists at headquarters. But let's see what happened to change his mind.
He went to Bombay and saw Wimbridge and all my enemies.
Bombay, because that's where the headquarters was up until a year earlier. And Wimbridge was the person who came to India with them. He was a mediocre theosophist and caused some trouble once they arrived in India. Alcott helped him get set up in business in Bombay, and he was doing well in his business. But he wasn't well disposed towards HPB.
Returning, he assured Hume, who is here and also coming daily, that, in his opinion, the evidence of our boys in the office and other witnesses is so contradictory that after visiting Bombay, he came to the conclusion that all our phenomena were fraudulent. Amen.
So who is back behind the scenes?
Hume.
He came all the way from Shimla at some point down to Madras, to Adyar. That's a distance of 2,500 kilometers. Takes 2 days by train to get there, wow, even today. And for what purpose do you think? Why would Hume show up, who has not said anything for months, more than a year? Let's find out.
And now, what is the use in writing to disabuse Mr. Arthur Gebhard's mind? As soon as the PRS Oracle will have proclaimed me a wholesale fraud, and all of you my dupes, as Hume does here laughingly, and with the greatest unconcern, your London Lodge Society is sure to collapse. Can even you, the true and the faithful, withstand this storm? Happy Damodar. He went to the land of bliss, to Tibet.
What?
And must now be far away in the regions of our masters. No one will ever see him now, I expect.
So, her faithful co-worker, Damodar, is gone.
The land of bliss, that sounds like Samadhi, but she also says Tibet.
So, yes, Damodar, who first encountered the Theosophical Society in 1879 in Bombay, has now been invited by the Mahatmas to come live in Tibet with them. So here's a chela who succeeded. He did everything right other than being overly enthusiastic. That was his only drawback.
Well, Darbagiri Nath was also living there, so he must have succeeded.
Yes, but that was before Theosophy ever arrived in India.
Okay. Dharmagiri was probably a long time.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
His conversion had nothing to do with
the TS. Okay.
Yeah,
But Damodar was new and progressed quickly.
very quickly. And he is able, obviously, to transmit letters if he wanted to. But we learned earlier that he declined to. He did not want to deal with Sinnett or any of the other Europeans. And all of the Asian chelas were unwilling to do that. HPB was the only one that was willing to put herself out there and accept the karma that comes from that. So Damodar left in February. Within 2 months after HPB arrived back, he was invited and left, and now he's in Tibet. And she said, and I expect we will never hear from him. And she was right. We never heard from him again.
Wow.
We'll hear about him, but we won't hear from him.
The land of bliss to Tibet. Wow. Must now be far away. In the regions of our masters. Were the masters always based in Tibet?
Well, remember, KH at least split his time between Shigatse and Ladakh in a different part of the Himalayan range.
Okay.
But that part was in India.
Still high up in the mountains, though.
Yeah. That's the part that I went to in
Right.
2006.
And there are many monasteries all throughout the whole region. Okay.
The Indus River Valley runs through there, and it's dotted with monasteries on either side of the river.
That's said to be the birthplace of yoga philosophy.
Yeah, exactly.
Also, wow. I'm sure he was there. Do you know if there are a bunch of monasteries up in Tibet? I mean, I'm sure there are in Tibet.
yeah.
There were and there still are.
Yeah,
all over.
of course. And remember, Shigatse is where the Teshu Lama, or sometimes called the Panchen Lama,
Panchen Lama.
was headquartered there. They were working directly with the Panchen Lama.
I wonder how much the Dalai Lama knows about these guys.
Who knows?
Probably something.
Yeah, I bet he does.
Is he a theosophist?
No, but as you know,
I know.
He came to visit in 1981. And
Yes.
rode in my car.
Do you know if he ever visited the TS headquarters again after that?
He was in Chicago. He didn't stay at the TS quarters, but Tim Boyd met him at a conference in Chicago, and they had an interaction.
Would it stand to reason that he's been to Adyar?
I don't know. I don't know of any instances where he visited Adyar.
Okay. Well, this is where the accursed phenomena led us. Alcott is returning from Burma in 3 days and will find nice things. I like the way she writes.
Yeah.
She's fun. At first, Hume was all friendly. Then came the revelations. Hodgson had traced the brooch. I had given an identical brooch to Survey to be repaired. Before going to Shimla, he was told, and it was that brooch.
Survey seems to be Babula, who was HPB's servant. It's kind of an honorific title of someone who has a public or a function of working for a group of people.
Okay.
But as far as I can tell, that's who she's referring to by Survey.
Does Mrs. Sinnett remember that I spoke at that time of having had a pin very similar to it with pearls that I sent with another I bought in Shimla to my sister's children? I spoke of the likeness even to Mr. Hume. I asked Mr. Hume to have his pin sent to the jeweler, unknown to all but Survey, Wimbridge's partner and my mortal enemy, who will or will not identify it. Most probably he will. Why shouldn't he? For 100 rupees or so. Jeez.
Yeah.
Right. Those are three different people.
But Wimbridge was in business with someone else who apparently really doesn't like HPB. And she said, she told Hume, take that brooch that I brought to you phenomenally to the person who repaired, not that one, but repaired a similar one, and ask him if it's the same one. She said, I'm sure for 100 rupees or so, which was about $1,500, he'll give him whatever answer he wants. Now, as I said, this is a long letter, and we're going to continue it in our next session. At the beginning of that next session, we're going to find out that Hume has a solution for the dilemma that HPB is in. And
I'm sure he does.
We'll see what his solution is. I'm sure it's going to be very generous and very kind.
Mm-hmm. Very inspired. Enlightened solution.
Enlightened. Very much so. All right. Thank you for following along, and we will see you next time.